Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kevin, and this is Not Just Idle Chatter, here with...
Damien Echols, and we are so thankful that you guys chose to join us again. There's a lot of stuff you could be listening to out there, so we're grateful that you chose to give us this amount of your time. Thank you.
Yeah, so I just wanted to take a moment, obviously, to thank everybody that's here. And yesterday, we had launched a new podcast. It was the podcast one. It was the State of the World, which more of a PSA on what's kind of going on in our current environment. But Damien and I actually haven't had the chance to talk with you guys, our viewers and listeners, on what we are looking to do with this podcast project. I think one of the most important things is to be able to bring something important to the table so that way anybody that's tuning in will be able to walk away with something of value.
Yes.
Damien, why don't you talk a little bit about what you are looking to do and how you feel?
I agree absolutely 100%. I think you just hit it in a nutshell. For me, the things that I always look for that I want to take into my life are things that inspire me, things that motivate me, things that give me some sort of sustenance, intellectual sustenance, emotional sustenance, spiritual sustenance, something that feeds me in some way, not just random horseshit, which was why one of the reasons we chose the name Not Just Idle Chatter. We want to be able to bring people something beyond the mediocre, beyond the mundane, something that, just an example. I learned one time when I was in prison that the reason, like when you walk into a cathedral, that they have these huge vaulted ceilings and the doors are really high, is so that whenever you walk in, your gaze is immediately drawn upwards. You look up automatically. And whenever you do, the first thing you think is, wow, that's amazing. Even if it's just a split second, it gives you this feeling of transcending normal, everyday crap. At that moment, you're not thinking about the fact that, you need to go buy cat food or whatever it is. You feel a moment whenever you rise above normal daily mediocrity. And I think everybody wants more of that in their lives. So that's one of the main things that I want to bring to people, as well discover for myself. I'm looking forward to talking to people that I don't know about things that I don't know anything about, just to, broaden my own horizons, as well as, bringing some of that to other people who might be listening to us. I'm curious, what, just off the top of your head, what is it that you would like to see people walk away from this with?
Well, obviously we both have a huge connection with people from all walks of life, whether it be people that we interact with on a daily basis, musicians, actors, you name it. The one thing that I'm looking to personally gain out of this is to be a more genuine, humble human being. I feel like everybody has a story to tell, both of us included. I'd like for us and them to be able to create an open dialogue, to be able to share our stories, our passions, things that we feel uplift us in our own lives, outside of all the normal chatter that you hear in the world. And to be able to say, hey, look, I'm really passionate about homeless services, or I'm really passionate about saving the ocean. I'm really passionate about helping stop littering, or whatever the case may be. I want this to be a platform for people to be able to sound off and talk about what they see that is impacting their own life and how they feel that it may change for the better, and possibly what happens if those things don't necessarily happen within our lifetimes, where things can go. But the goal is to be able to talk to everybody about what they're very passionate about, also find out what they have going on in their lives, things that are upcoming. But importantly, just to make sure that by the end of this, both you and I, the guest, and also our listeners can take something home that they might not necessarily have thought about before. Yes. I think that's the most important thing with all of this.
Exactly. Yes. I was thinking of that. I always think of it as realizations and epiphanies. Like
Yeah.
I love whenever I find something that does that for me, whether it's a documentary that I see on TV, or whether it's a conversation I've had with somebody or something I read in a book. I always feel like if you're consuming it, and that's really what we're doing. You know, we always talk about like you are what you eat. And whenever we say that, we normally just think of like literal food, whatever it is we're eating, but we are consuming stuff all the time. We're consuming what we hear, we're consuming what we see, you know, we're taking in a lot of stuff. And one thing that I do want to say right off the bat, this may happen maybe a lot, maybe a little, I don't know, but when I was in prison, we didn't realize until after I got out that my brain did not form in the way that most people's brains form out here. I was in there during a time when my brain was still literally forming connections. And a huge part of that happened in a decade of solitary confinement. So we didn't realize until after I got out that I had lost a lot of shit that people take for granted, like facial recognition, because you don't see faces in solitary confinement. Voice recognition, you don't hear voices in there. I had sustained a lot of brain trauma that we weren't even aware of until I started working with a doctor out here who started doing the study to sort of see the way solitary confinement affects the human mind in the same way that the NFL did when they were studying like concussions with players. The reason I bring this up is because one of the side effects is sometimes I will forget whatever the hell I'm talking about right in the middle of a sentence. And whenever I do, I will look at you and say, what were we just talking about? And you'll have to remind me. Sometimes whenever you do, it'll come back. Sometimes it won't. It'll be just gone forever. But that comes from a lot of brain trauma, essentially. So just telling you now, if that happens, that's what it is. And the reason I said that is because I forgot what the hell we were talking about right in the middle of a sentence.
So obviously the nice thing is we all have brain farts. The goal is just that we want to be able to let everybody see us as human beings, and
Yes.
that everybody else are human beings too. We all put our pants on one leg after the other. We all use the same toilet. But we all have different opinions that we might not necessarily have seen before. So by the fact that I might be able to share my personal opinions, and Damien might have different opinions as myself, and the guest might have different opinions too, we'll all hopefully allow for us to be able to open up and be like, I actually didn't think about that until you just said that now. Because it's always good to be able to have some sort of aha moment or enlightenment that what you were thinking about just didn't really click until that moment.
Right. The epiphanies and realizations. That was it. That's what we were talking about.
There we go.
Yes. So that's, you know, a huge part of what I'm hoping that people walk away from this with. The same thing you just said, that light bulb going off moment.
Yeah. So obviously Damien and I share a story together that started, what was this, probably late 2011, I'd probably say.
Yeah. I actually met Kevin days after I got out of prison. He was the very first person that I ever met on my own, interacting with the world. You know, up until that, like I said, I'd only been out for a few days. So up until that point, I had only really been interacting with, you know, either my attorneys or a documentary filmmaker, people who were involved in the case in some sort of way. Kevin was the very first person that I ever met as a normal, just relationship with another human being whenever I walked out of prison. And for me, the way it started was, you know, I'd only been out a few days and we didn't realize it at the time, but I was going through the start of what would be the first nervous breakdown that I had whenever I got out of prison. You know, we weren't thinking about me getting out whenever I first got out. We were thinking, you know, once you get out, that's the finish line and everybody lives happily ever after. So we weren't putting any thought whatsoever into what life out here was going to be like. And then whenever I did get out here, going from 20 years in prison, half of that in solitary confinement, to suddenly being out here again, it was psychologically and emotionally devastating. I mean, it absolutely broke me to the point that I was functioning like an invalid. I had to have somebody around me to take care of me pretty much 24/7 in the first months that I got out. Well, even probably the first couple of years that I was out. And Kevin would end up being one of those people. He would end up being one of my babysitters. But I met him. We met the first time. I lived in an apartment less than 10 blocks away from the shop that Kevin was managing and running.
Apartment.
It was a pretty nice apartment. But I was so like, didn't know how to deal with the world that I would only come out and I would walk in one direction from that apartment every day. And I would only walk like one block further than I had went the day before. And then I would turn around and go back home. And then the next day I'd walk another block or two. Always in a straight line, never very far. To me, most people would think this is like something, like kids in preschool learn how to do. For me, this was like a huge thing. I was learning to function in the world again. Well, it just so happened that the shop that Kevin was running was like literally less than 10 blocks away from the apartment. And this is how crazy life is, how crazy the universe works. He's running the shop. I see it there one day and I think, okay, I'm just going to go up here and see what's up here just for the hell of it. I walk up there, Kevin's sitting at the front desk. We start talking about like getting tattooed by somebody there. He asked me for my name because you have to validate how old someone is here. And he looks at me for a minute and whenever he sees my ID, he goes, did you just get out of prison? And I said, yeah. How'd you know? And he said, because one of the other guys was just in here like a few days ago. And at first I was like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? And he said, Jesse Miskelly came in here with a film crew a couple of days ago and had the tattoo on the top of his head finished. I mean, just the chances that we would randomly end up in this same tattoo shop are kind of astronomical in and of themselves. Even when you take things into consideration, like New York is only 12 miles long from top to bottom. But they say that if you went to a different restaurant 3 times a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, it would still take you 20 years to eat at every single restaurant on this island. Tattoo shops are not as prevalent as restaurants, but there's still a lot of them out there. So the fact that me and Jesse Miskelly would both just wander into the same one was kind of amazing in itself. But from that point on, Kevin was a huge part of at least the first couple of years that I was out of prison in every single way. He was a huge part of what reintroduced me to the world. Whenever I had the very first art show that I had out of prison was done because Kevin says, why don't you do an art show? So, that was a first for me. That was him bringing me out into the world again in a really big way. Then we would do other things. Like he says at one point, why don't you start to tattoo people? I'm not a tattoo artist. I don't know even how to use the machinery. So he's standing there over my shoulder doing everything from changing the needle to making sure I'm not mangling people while we're going through the tattooing process. There was a short time whenever I thought, everybody told me maybe you should get out of New York for a while and go somewhere quieter. So I moved up to Massachusetts, to Salem, Massachusetts, for about a year before I realized I don't like the quiet. I would rather be in the city. But while I was there, it was the stuff that Kevin and I used to do together, kind of the world that we had formed and the relationship that we had. It was one of the things that I missed the most about being here. It was one of the things that left a huge hole in my life, to be quite honest. It was one of the reasons I wanted to come back. So whenever he started talking about doing a podcast, I always feel like I just don't have, to be honest, a lot to say about anything going on in the world for the most part. There's so little in the world that actually interests me now. uh, I've gone back to living indoors a great deal of time, so the quarantine's not affecting me much. But the chance for us to do something together again, it was like going back to the old days in a way. And it
Yeah.
made me I honestly don't think I would have done this if anybody else in the world would have asked me, you want to do a podcast together? I would have probably said, I'm good. But that was the reason for doing this.
Yeah. And it's nice because, when Damien came into the studio, it was a very surreal moment. Our tattoo studio, it was pretty well known when I was there. It was one of the top studios in the city. So we did get our fair share of people that rolled through. One of the things, with Jesse Miskelly coming through, one of our coworkers at the time wound up tattooing, like finishing the clock on the top of his head.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very quick interaction. It was like, hey, thanks so much. It was impactful to him because they were doing the filming of it for, what was it, the last episode of Paradise Lost, or that
That's
they
what
were,
it was.
I think they
Yeah.
were trying to get it
Yeah.
on that episode, but I don't know if it actually aired or anything. But yeah,
I
it
can't
was.
remember. Did you ever watch it?
I watched a little bit of it, but I'll be honest with you, man. I'm gonna be the one of those weird hypocritical friends that when a friend of mine has a new book that comes out, that has a documentary that comes out or anything, I try to distance myself away from the fame aspect of things, and I'd rather focus on the friendship aspect of
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's nice to be able to have that difference, to be able to pull everything aside and be like, look, I know you have this life outside of that, but we have a life that's totally different.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't necessarily involve the fame and what people think might be fortune of things. But,
Mm-hmm.
it's nice to be able to just have this commonality of being two human beings that walk side by side together, to be able to share experiences together. So when it comes to the books and documentaries and things, I get weirded out, man. Like with our buddy Randy, he came out with his book at the same time, and I'm like, he gave it to me, and I'm like, I can't do it. I like read a page or two, and I'm like, it's not that I don't want to, like, I want to know their story, but the story that they share on an intimate one-on-one level is so much different than what someone might necessarily read.
Yeah.
And I think that has a lot of importance in cherishing certain relationships at the same time. So
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. Also, and it's also like, usually if somebody's well known for something, like in my case, the documentaries going to prison, whatever, or in Randy's case, being, the lead singer in a band, people start to think that that's the entirety of your identity.
yeah, it's not.
That's exactly, that's for me, like all that kind of stuff, it plays like a tiny, tiny role in my life and who I am and the things that formed me and everything else. I saw it, but I honestly can't even remember it because it was like in the first month that I got out of prison. So I was still shell shocked. I can remember sitting in the theater and I remember it being on the screen, but I couldn't tell you one single thing that was actually in it. Like even if the footage of him getting a clock tattooed on his head was in it.
Yeah, I don't even remember. I think
Mhm.
I went with you to, what was it, the that movie theater that's on like 23rd Street. Henry was there, a bunch of other.
Oh, yeah. I can't remember what the name of it is.
There
Yeah,
was
but I've
that
been
one,
there.
and then there was the one that Peter Jackson was at.
Yeah.
That was I think they might have been both the same documentary. I mean, they
I can't
all the West of
remember.
Memphis. I think that all kind of blurs together at this
Yeah, it
point.
all runs together for me. I
Yeah,
can't keep it even apart anymore. It was during a really, really crazy time when for me it kind of felt like even though I'd gotten out of prison, it was all anybody wanted to ask me about, all
yeah,
anybody wanted to talk to me about. Because we were doing like a tour to promote the documentary and a tour to promote the book. And then I ended up doing like a 2-year long speaking engagement tour till it got to the point where I thought, why did I even get out if this is all I'm ever going to
yeah,
be asked about or people ever going to want to talk to me about? And that was also one of the things about being, at the shop, us hanging out together and everybody else there together that eventually even became, really like a family.
yeah,
The close thing that a lot of people have to families in New York. That was the first time that I had ever got to experience something like that was in no way connected to the past or anything else. And I
Yeah.
think that was a really huge transformative part of me coming out into the world again and being introduced to new things, which is why I'm kind of excited about this, because we're doing it again.
Yeah. And, it was everybody has a past. Everybody doesn't necessarily have a future just yet. They might not know where they're going, but with guidance and, some coaching and understanding for things and people around them, hopefully they'll be able to try to move forward in a different format that might make a little bit more impact on their life as well as others.
Absolutely.
When we first met, it was the same I don't want to say 9 to 5 job, because the tattoo industry is not necessarily a 9 to 5 job, but it was still same wake up, go to work, come home, same grind over and over again. And, while I had friends in New York, it was one of those things where I didn't necessarily have like a common bond the same way when I grew up in Maryland with the kids that I grew up with when I was like 5, 6 years old. And, I still talk to a lot of those kids that I grew up with, some not so much, but, when you grow up, you start to see the value of certain friendships and relationships and people's intentions. And I knew when you came into the studio, I think you had actually come into the shop maybe a couple days beforehand and got tattooed. And
Yep.
I wasn't there. And then when you actually had come in, I'm like looking at you a little bit, and I see the glasses, and I'm like, something seems off with this fella. and then when, I got your name and I'm looking at the ID, I'm like, huh, okay. And then I mentioned Jesse at the same time. Then you wind up getting tattooed. And then at the end of it, that was it. Like, there was no like, hey man, well, it was great, thanks so much. I'm never the type of person that like tries to take photos with people. And, I'm in the music industry as well, working with a lot of different bands as their photographer and magazines. And, I've never had that type of thought to where like, I need to take pictures with people to like say, hey, we're here together. Because nobody cares about that shit. Like, it's about the interaction that you have at that moment and what it means personally outside of anything else. What other people think about when it comes to that stuff, I don't care. But, when you wound up leaving, it was like, huh, that was pretty surreal. Like, I can't believe, I'm glad that you're doing well and you have some traction going for yourself. And then a couple of days later, you came back again. Yep. And you got tattooed again. And then at that point, you were starting to talk about how you haven't really lived in the real world to experience real world scenarios and things like social media and cell phones in general. And I remember you had an iPhone, and like, you're like, I don't even know how to use this thing. Like, what is this? Like, cell phones, when you, like, I don't even think cell phones necessarily existed. And when your town, like, if you had a cell phone, you were the mayor at that point. Like, so it was like, you have all this technology in your hand and you don't know what to do with it. So we start sitting back and forth and shooting crap and talking about, what Twitter is and what Instagram is, and, how social media has an impact on, what we do, and, you getting on there as well. And, it was like one baby step at a time, us trying new adventures. And that was the really cool thing. And it was, I'm sure you have a totally different perspective on what it was doing for you, but what it was doing for me, it was allowing for me to come out of my shell at the same time and share my experiences with someone for the first time, so that we can try things together. Mm-hmm. And it was really cool to be able to try new restaurants together, to be able to experience different foods. Like, we would always be like, yeah, never tried this before, let's go do that. God knows how many tacos we have consumed around this damn city. So it's just cool to be able to have those experiences and say, like, what happened from when we started and then the journey that we've gone through together, and in the period of time that you have been out, you have written multiple books, you have more books in the works, you have, a magic project that you've been working on, you're on Patreon at the same time, you've had multiple gallery shows, installations, interviews, things that are just not even a part of your past at the same time, which is great. And it's like, I understand there are certain situations where you have to use a previous platform to be able to help accelerate you forward. But it's nice to be able to know that at a certain point, you can just cut that tie and be like, I've developed an identity for myself outside of this, and I can push forward at the same time. And, you know, outside of the tattoo studio, um, I wound up becoming a photographer in the music industry. And this was something when Damien and I weren't, or when Damien and I first started hanging out, I was taking photos. I was, you know, just shooting things, kind of getting my mind off of the daily grind at the same time. And then all of a sudden somehow I found a niche for myself. I found that musicians really liked what I was doing. And then all of a sudden I start getting hired by different magazines and develop a following for myself. So it's nice to see that we've both still continued our lives and tried to push ourselves in good directions that aren't necessarily in the same direction together, because we're two different people. We're individuals that are operating on our own heartbeats, and, you know, being able to push each other forward in the directions that we want to go in is great. And I think
Yeah.
that's the goal with this, is just to make sure that whatever I have passion for and whatever you have passion for, we both are there for each other to be like, dude, that's awesome. I'm so glad you got this. You know, good for you. Not being that
Mm-hmm.
type of person to be like, man, I'm jealous of you. I want a piece of what you have, because that doesn't do anything but take the negativity out of that other person's life. And everybody has their own mind and control of what they want to be able to do. But if it's something that you're strong and passionate about, that's what friendship's about, is to be able to support you in your passions and desires, to be able to keep moving with things.
Exactly. Supporting each other, and at the same time, like, still having that, you know, I call it a sense of separation, but it's kind of not even really a sense of separation. It's more just that I honestly believe every single person in this world is here for a reason, you know, to do something. I don't think the universe is going to waste a lot of time and energy making cookie cutter people who are all supposed to be interested in the same thing, doing the same thing, living the same kind of lives. You know, the universe would not waste its energy like that. And I always think the way that shows up in the physical world is through even our genetics, our DNA. You know, this is the reason why no one in the history of the world ever has, and nobody in the future of the world ever will have the exact same DNA that we have, is because every single person is here to do something different. You know, our purposes might cross paths with other people sometimes. They might be similar to other people's. We can, you know, be like, what's the word? Encourage mutual growth in each other, but it doesn't mean we're all necessarily supposed to be walking in the exact same footsteps. I agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
Another thing, you know, one other thing I was thinking about this morning also was something, you know, another one of the reasons we were starting this project now is because, you know, we're in this quarantine. Everybody's locked down. And some people are still thinking of this as like downtime, or, you know, time when everything is shut down. And I was thinking this morning about this quote from Henry Rollins, where he said, there is no such thing as downtime. There is no such thing as spare time. There is no such thing as free time. What you're living right now is your life. This is it. And for us, it was like kind of taking advantage of this time to start this new project, and also wanting to encourage other people to do the same, to realize that, yes, in a lot of ways, this may be difficult, what everyone's going through right now, but in a lot of other ways, we could all gain something really great and positive out of this.
Yeah, I really want people to focus, especially, yeah, we are living in weird times right now. But this quarantine, even though, you know, we were talking about doing the podcast in the beginning and how we want people to uh, you know, feel engaged at the same time, you know, we're all stuck inside. This podcast is going to be one of those situations at the moment where we're doing everything remotely, you know, for
Mm-hmm.
safety reasons. And there are a lot of people out there that, you know, will eventually hopefully see the cues of making sure that they're keeping themselves safe. And when the quarantine is over, hopefully during that time when you've had your own, uh, moments where you've had to lock yourself inside for a couple weeks, you're able to focus on yourself and do things that you might not have done before. Read books, work on puzzles. If you want to watch movies, cool. Exercise, things that can stimulate your brain,
Yes.
will hopefully make people stronger when all of this is over. I can't wait for this to be over because we'll be able to interact on a personal level at the same time to continue doing these podcasts and maybe going to different places, like,
Yeah.
going to restaurants and things and trying
Yeah.
new food and,
Yes.
doing the podcast in those situations. But it would be cool to be able to just have the experience when the time is ready. And right now, it's a different time. There's a different
Mhm.
focus in mind. There's a different objective. And the objective isn't a negative thing. You don't need to look at anything as a negative thing. What goes on outside right now, yeah, there might be a lot of bad things happening, but you need to focus on the positivity and what you can do to bring to the table to make your own mind stay stimulated.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I was saying about everybody being here for something different, I really do believe, and I believe this with the entirety of my entire heart and soul, because I've seen it's true in my own life, is that whenever we do find what it is that we're supposed to be doing in this world, that's where your bliss comes from. That's where your happiness is going to come from. And the more you can pour yourself into doing what it is that you're here to do, the happier you're going to be. The more you have distracting you from that, usually the less happy you're going to be. But whenever you do find that thing, it's like external circumstances and conditions cease to matter by a great deal. That's the only way I can articulate it, is once you know what you're supposed to be doing in this world, when you know what your life's purpose, when you know what your will is, and you apply yourself to doing it, then nothing out here is going to seem nearly as bad. You are going to be spending your time, your energy, and your life force dedicated to doing what you're in the world to do. And you can do that when you're in quarantine, and you can do that when you're not in quarantine. So hopefully, my hope is that maybe some people out there during this time get to do some research, get to start looking into new things, and maybe come across something that never would have entered their mind in a million years, and realize this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And for the first time, maybe actually experiences true happiness from it.
Yeah. And, the fact that we're putting this podcast on YouTube right now, people can engage and we can engage back with them. There's a comment section below. And, I see clearly within that first episode, people are feeling engaged. We've seen a lot of people wanting to be able to subscribe, to be able to have interest in this project at the same time. And it's all about being able to try to engage with you guys and help create and promote positivity. So if there's things that you have going on in your life or things that you're trying to achieve, there's a comment section below. Add what you have and what you have desire for. If you have thoughts for us at the same time on what you would
Yeah.
like us to talk about,
Yes.
this is the perfect time for everybody to be able to have input, to be able to create and grow together. And I'd love for this to be a scenario where everybody just has an open channel of communication, and to where we can sit here and do something awesome together.
Yeah, that's a really, really great idea. Actually, I didn't even occur to me until you said that. But the reason we're here also is not just to hear our own voices, but to talk about what it is that you guys want to hear about. You're the ones that we're doing this for. We're not doing it, just to hear our own selves. So whenever we are talking, we want to talk about the things that you're interested in, the things that you want to hear about. So whenever those things come up, whatever it is, whether it's something going on in the world, or whether it's some abstract concept or something going on in your own life, I mean, those are the things that we want to know about and the things that we want to talk about. So by all means, please leave suggestions in the comments for directions that you would like to see us go in the future.
Yeah. So I think that this is probably a great start for us to be able to, end today. Clearly, there's going to be a lot more episodes coming up we have a lot of people that are jumping on board with us to be able to do this podcast. I think you guys are really going to be enjoying some of the guests that we're going to have with you, and to be able to share some sort of message from what they believe in and what we believe in, and see how this can all work together. So, that being said, again, Damien, do you have any final statements?
I just want to say one more time that we really truly appreciate you guys' love and support more than we have the ability to articulate. Both those of you who've been with us since the very beginning in the tattoo shop days, and those who are just finding out about us right now and joining us for the first time. We truly appreciate all of you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, guys, thank you so much. This was episode 2 of Not Just Idle Chatter with myself, Kevin Wilson, and
Damien Echols.
Feel free to leave comments below. If you guys also have questions, you can email us at notjustidlechatter@gmail.com. We also created a social media page, which is just a place marker at the moment, but you can feel free to go ahead and at that at Not Just Idle Chatter. Myself, my personal Instagram is Kevin Wilson NYC, and Damien's is
just at Damien Echols, all one word.
Pretty straightforward. Guys, I appreciate you guys taking the time today and listen to us rattle on and share a little bit about who we are and what we're trying to do here. So until next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.